Hi guys, what's up? Welcome back to another video. Today you join me in the 2024 Nissan Ariya, an all-electric family SUV with lots of Japanese inspired design. I'm here today to see if it stacks up against some of its main rivals, the Hyundai Ioniq 5, the Kia EV6, the Skoda Enyaq and so on. So before we get into the review, let's talk about specs and pricing. The Ariya starts at around £39,000 for the entry-level Engage model. The entry-level car comes with things like 19-inch alloys, a reversing camera, full LED headlights, heat pumper standard, which is nice, and across the whole range is a 12.5-inch infotainment system and main screen, wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and virtual personal assistant. I personally would avoid that entry-level model though, it's quite slow to charge. Moving up to the sweet spot in the range, the advanced model comes with dual zone climate control, a 360-degree surround view cam, and faster 130 kilowatt charging. Although let's be honest, by today's standards, that's still not great. The next model up is the one I've got here today, which is the Evolve. Thankfully, it comes with a pan roof as standard, which I absolutely love. Bose audio, heated and ventilated front seats, and an intelligent smart key system, which is actually really good. The top end model is the Evolve Plus, and that is the fastest one. Comes with all the extra styling, like the 20-inch alloys as standard, Napa leather upgrade, and also the fastest power output. The top end one of those will set you back around 60 grand, so quite a big price difference. A couple of different powertrain options. The entry level one is a front wheel drive 217 horsepower configuration with a 63 kilowatt hour battery, good for around 250 miles in ideal conditions. Then you've got the next one up, which is an 87 kilowatt hour battery, 242 horsepower front wheel drive, good for around 329 miles. So quite decent range. The one I've got here is the first E-Force model, which is their four wheel drive, 87 kilowatt hours again, but 302 horsepower. And that top of the range model, the Evolve Plus, comes with 394 horsepower, 5.1 seconds to 60, so pretty rapid indeed. I think to hit the sweet spot in the Ariya range, look to spend around 50 grand. So then let's talk about styling. The Ariya I think is a really good looking car, much more so than a lot of its rivals in fact. It's quite big and bulbous in a way, but it's got lots of Japanese inspired design, and I think it looks particularly great with these optional 20-inch alloy wheels and also this ceramic grey paint, which is a £745 option. You get a nice light bar across the back, LED lights all round, and dynamic indicators which really look the part. There's a couple of really cool colours to choose from, including a copper, which I checked out last year. I'm struggling to find an angle that I don't like looking at this car. You can still tell it's a Nissan by the front lights, if that makes sense, but it definitely looks like an upmarket design. It's quite a large car and has lots of presence as well, which I like. It's very imposing from the front, and the back end I think looks really good. I also like that when you walk up to it with the smart intelligent key, all of the lights come on and it unlocks for you without you having to even touch it. The Japanese inspiration comes from the art of kumiko, which is a woodworking technique where lots of little shapes come together to make nice patterns. This is something you'll notice on the outside, such as on the front grille, but when you step inside, that's when the design really starts to show up. The interior of this car is gorgeous. The colour and texture choices in here, plus the copper accents, they were all chosen specifically by Nissan when they actually stepped outside into the direct sunlight with the materials to make sure that they look good in all sorts of conditions. That's attention to detail. You'll notice in the front here, it's all open like a lounge. That's what they were going for. They wanted it to feel like a comfortable kind of luxury sitting room experience. You've got thick, deep shag pile carpet, the sort that you'd want in your bedroom, that you can really dig your toes into. It's lovely. Although I must say it does look a little bit worse for wear on the driver's side with the mud. That extends into the back as well. In the front here, you've also got these floor lanterns, again with that Kumiko inspired design on them. It even extends to the speaker grills with the Bose system, and in the door cards as well, and they pick certain colours and accents just to make it look just right. Looks fantastic at night with the floor lantern on and also the LED strip that wraps all the way around the dash. That same pattern extends up here by the mirror, and there's just little hints of it everywhere you look. This centre console moves electrically out of the way, so you can expand this space even further. So right now I've got it kind of halfway into its forward position, so it's easy to access all of the controls with my hand. And it's super ergonomic really, and you can just reverse it all the way out of the way so that you've got much more of an open plan layout in the front here. There's no center console to bash your leg into. You've got a completely open space. Underneath you've got space for your USB and USB-C charging and your 12-volt power outlet. And even if you've got a cable plugged in there and you're not using the wireless Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, you can actually store your phone in the center compartment, which looks as though it should be massive, but isn't. It's got a little storage cubby in there and a place for your phone, and that's it. But you know what? I don't really care. Use of materials is quite nice. You've got this kind of suede Alcantara style fabric on the dash with kind of like a hand-stitched vibe to it. and you've got some squidgy materials on the top here and the middle. Strangely, you've got some cheap crappy plastic by the door handles, which is a shame. I think they could have extended this squidgy material here to this area. I think that just would have been a bit better. I don't know why they didn't do that, but it's not really the end of the world. You've got a dark wood design across the dash, which adds a nice little accent with your climate controls on. And then you've got a copper accent that runs all the way along, which complements the blue really nicely. Talking of blue, I really like these seats. They've got this nice pattern to them, which apparently is supposed to improve blood flow as well. And I've got to say, in fairness, with the headrest position, the cushioning, just the way it feels overall, feels like a really premium seat. And actually, arguably, one of the more comfortable ones I've sat in recently. I think this would rival higher end cars easily when it comes to seat comfort. There's loads of adjustment too. You've got lumbar, and you've also got electric tilt for the thigh support, lots of up, down, forward, back motion. The lumbar is 4-way also. Overall, just really, really good, and electrically slides when you get in and out of the car. What I do like as well is when you're fiddling about with those controls down there, it comes up on the screen showing you what you're doing, which kind of takes the ambiguity out of it if you're not sure. With the center console slid back out the way, you've also got an electrically sliding center console part that comes out of the dash. So that's kind of like a cubby hole, but it can also be used as a table for your iPad, your laptop, or in my case today, my little notepad. It's a super cool touch, and it's really, really practical and useful. The interior is finished off with this nice twin spoke steering wheel, which I don't normally like too much. It's got copper stitching on, which is really nice, feels nice in the hand. The layout's quite practical, and unfortunately it's not aluminium, even though it looks like it, the buttons on here. And there is some gloss black, which is kind of fingerprinty and horrible, but at least you've got some tactile bumps on there so that you can feel what you're pressing, and it's not haptic like in Volkswagen stuff. My only other major quality complaint is that things don't quite line up. This copper trim that runs along the middle, which incorporates the vents and the center controls, you've got options on there for your volume and your infotainment. But there's a few little bits here that just don't quite line up because you've got buttons that are integrated. It's a nice design and it works well. It just doesn't quite look right to the eye when it's in the corner of your eye. Minor complaint though, really. I just think overall the aesthetic side of it looks fantastic, and every time I look down I can just see that thick carpet as well with the kind of the Japanese pattern on it, and it just looks wonderful. I love it. There's some interesting practical elements built in as well, like this nice square rear view mirror here. You've not got much visibility out of the back, to be honest. Like, it's a small rear window and the C-pillar is absolutely huge, so there is a big blind spot. You've got your blind spot monitoring in your mirrors, and it does do an audible beep if you're about to hit something, and it's not too intrusive like some of the Korean cars, so that's a plus from me. But you can, at the flip of a switch back here, activate the screen on the rear view mirror, and that turns it into a rear view cam, which has got kind of a night vision element to it as well. So you can get a little bit of a clearer view if you're kind of unsure, and that does actually widen the field of view quite significantly from what I can see through the mirror itself, so can actually prove quite useful. And it's nice that you can just do it on the flick of a switch. All of the climate control buttons are touch sensitive, but they're not touch sensitive in the traditional sense. If you prod them, they've actually got haptic feedback, so it feels like you're pressing a button. It's a little bit of a weird sensation at first, but imagine like a iPhone 7 home button. When you press it, like, it feels like you're pressing it and it vibrates a little bit, but you're not actually. It's like that. This extends down to this center console area as well, where you've got your drive mode select, your e-pedal mode, auto park, and that kind of thing. The buttons are a little bit difficult to find while you're driving along. You can sort of feel an indentation slightly, but yeah, I prefer if they were a little bit more embossed. If I remember rightly, on the earlier cars that I tested, they did have more of a raised finish to them, so it's a shame they did away with that, because you do have to look down there when you're driving. I do like how simplistic and clutter-free it looks though. That's one thing that they said about the design ethos of this car, is to eliminate clutter, and you can really tell. In terms of your tech and your infotainment, it is a standard Nissan affair, which means, in other words, it's not the best on the market. It's functional, certainly, and these screens are quite nice, they're quite clear. This infotainment one though, it is a bit recessed, which I don't like, but it does kind of angle towards me, which is good, and it integrates with this one in front of me as well, so that's quite nice overall. The thing is that I would say is that it's just a little bit outdated and clunky. The animations sometimes lag, there's not many extra fancy features. It's just functional, and it works, and if you're coming from an older car, you might like that, but it's not a patch on the stuff coming out of Hyundai, Kia, all of those manufacturers. They just do it better. And something like a Mustang Mach-E as well, that's a much better infotainment system than what you get in this. But it is functional, it gets the job done. I would ignore using the sat-nav in there, the sort of TomTom style system. Just use your Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, and you'll be fine. You won't complain about it too much. What I don't like though is that the Bose audio system whilst it sounds pretty good, I've had it plugged in watching some like Netflix content and some films and stuff like that on my phone. That sounds phenomenal. But music-wise, I don't think you've got enough clarity in terms of your adjustment. The EQ is literally just bass and treble. You can't go any further than that. And I prefer to have a little bit more control to get it to my sound preference. You do have a nice head-up display which you can adjust, which has the essential information. But again, it's not got much on there. It's just your traffic sign recognition and stuff like that. It doesn't do much to do with cruise control and all that sort of thing. Screen in front of me, I like the design of it, but it is a bit cluttered on Nissans. You've got kind of a few options that you can scroll through using the steering wheel, such as your trip information, what's going on with your media, which will even show you Apple CarPlay songs changing and things like that. But yeah, it shows your estimated charge time, which is useful as well, especially if you're on a long journey. But apart from that, there's not really much you can do with it. You can show a compass on there. It shows your drive mode. The detail that it does show is useful. It shows you what the current speed limit is, and it also shows you what's going on with your drive modes, and if you're using any regen braking and stuff like that, it moves on the fly. It's just what you'd expect. I just think it looks a little bit busy, and it's not the best on the market. Again, I don't think it's a bad system. I just think it's more functional than pretty. It is a little bit fingerprinty on the main display, but not the worst that I've seen, and there's also a lot of fingerprints on this gloss black section down here. It feels a little bit cheap, the window switches. So in terms of your rear space, it's pretty good, to be fair. You've got a completely flat floor, which I always really enjoy, especially because this is, it's built to be an EV, so it's not got the same architecture as a petrol car that's been converted to EV, and you still got a bit of a transmission hump. This is completely flat. You've got that lush carpeting back there. It's a really nice experience. There's not as much adjustment in the rear as some of its rivals, but overall it's a nice seating experience, although the curved sort of coupe-ish roofline can eat into headspace a little bit for taller passengers. On this one, you've got heated seats back there and some charging, and I would like a little bit more thigh support back there, but it's not to be scoffed at. At least you've got plenty of room to move your legs around. And overall, I wouldn't say it's a bad experience at all, especially with these nicely designed seats. The ISOFIX points are the zippy kind rather than the covered kind, and whilst it's nice not to lose the covers, it is a little bit of a faff getting in there. Yeah. Overall though, simplicity is key in here. I think it all looks fantastic, and the majority of it feels really good too. I'm always impressed by the gimmicky features that actually work and do something useful. This electric table that comes out of the dash, and this electrically sliding center console that you can adjust. It's just really good. And I love the Nissan gear selector. I know it's not the most popular opinion out there, but it's like a mouse style where you just grab it, press the side and slide it backwards or forwards. I just think it just works really, really well. It's just a simple design. I love the blue, I love the copper accents. I just think it's a super, super nice place to be, and it stands out from the crowd. And I think that's this car's really strong point. In terms of practicality, no, it's not the best. There's more center console space in the rivals. These door bins, although they're quite large, it's not very practical. My bottle's rattling around in there. These cup holders in the middle are useless. My cup's rattling around and this thing in the middle flaps about, and it's really annoying. The glove box, again, not the biggest, but I'm not that bothered because it just looks and feels so good. It's the same story when you get to the boot area. There's no frunk in this car, which is a real shame. Rivals do normally have that space for charging cables and things like that. And the boot space in this one isn't the best either. You've got less space back there than in a Volkswagen ID4, and that wasn't particularly great to start with. Also, there's no easy access to fold the seats down. You have to lean right over and get your trousers all muddy on the back of the car. There is, thankfully though, a place to store the parcel shelf underneath the boot floor. But what's even worse news is if you get this four-wheel drive model, there's even less space still. It's a practical area, don't get me wrong, in terms of loading and things like that, but it's just nowhere near what its rivals are. If you were to go for something like a Skoda Enyaq, you'd definitely get a bit more space to play around with back there. 150 kilowatt charging is bugging me as well. I keep thinking about that. It's not bad, but it's just not great, is it? Especially for something that's kind of supposed to be a really luxurious experience for you to waft along. It's not quite as luxurious if you have to stop every 5 minutes. Mind you, I suppose when you're sitting faffing about at the service station waiting for it to charge, at least you're sitting in a nice living room. Right, let's move on then to how this thing actually drives. And I've got to say, I'm quite impressed with it overall. Looking out the front, there's loads of visibility. It feels a little bit wider than it is, but you soon get used to it, and I can see the back corners of the car well in the mirrors. It's just that rear visibility is not great, but thankfully you've got the camera for that. The 360-degree cam makes it really, really easy to park, which is really nice. Stitches all the images together quite well, and for a larger car, it's very manoeuvrable. What I'm pleased to say as well is that the steering feel isn't actually too bad. Most Nissans feel quite heavily electrically assisted and there's not really much texture. But thankfully in this, it's a little bit better than the other Nissans that I've driven. I wouldn't say it's particularly direct, but I can feel a little bit through the wheel, and it's nicely weighted. Cruising along, the experience isn't too bad either. I've been averaging around 3.1 miles per kilowatt hour cruising along, and overall the suspension provides a nice experience. It's not exactly supple, it can be a little bit crashy over certain bumps, but not too much to complain about, and it can wallow a little bit at low speeds. But I don't dislike it. It's very comparable to its rivals, and it's a little bit softer than something like an EV6. I'm not getting too much tyre noise at all in here. It's quite well insulated considering, and the only noise I'm getting that's a bit annoying is some wind from this pillar. Turning circle is good for this size. Right, let's chuck it into sport mode then, so that I get increased throttle response. And let's throw it around a corner and see what happens. Right, I'm going to pin it out of here and I'm going to take this roundabout at some pace and just see what she can do. I can feel the weight of the car, just over 2 tons. Oh, bit of understeer. Oh, hey, that's not too bad at all, you know. In sport mode, you get this really cool noise. Sounds a bit like a spaceship. So that isn't present in the sort of eco modes. You've got a snow mode as well, and on this four-wheel drive model, and then you've got the standard normal mode. So the eco mode will kind of reduce the power and make it a bit easier on the regen braking. The normal mode is just for your standard driving, and then sport mode provides the best throttle response. Not bad at all. So I'll say this model just over 300 horsepower, so definitely sufficient. Yeah, I prefer this four-wheel drive model to the front-wheel drive models. I just think it just feels a little bit nicer. You don't have to worry too much about the torque steer side of things and, you know, it getting a bit too unruly when you stick your foot in it. Yeah, this one is just kind of, the power delivery is really good. Off the line, it feels really nice as well. And I don't really think it's necessary to go for the top end model. This is plenty quick enough. Obviously, if you want something with loads of punch, and that's a good one to go for, you get extra torque there. You'll want the four-wheel drive model if you're towing as well, because the towing capacity is 1,500 kilos as opposed to a rather paltry 750. You've got 3 driving modes for your regen braking. So you've got your standard drive mode. You can pop the gear selector down into the B mode, which provides more of a regen braking experience, which is normally how I like driving it. And there's also e-pedal mode as well on the button down here. Now, e-pedal mode I find a little bit annoying because it provides almost a one-pedal driving mode, and I say almost because it's just not. It's not bringing you all the way to a stop. You still have to use the normal brakes, which is a little bit annoying. They used to be able to do it all on one pedal, and you know, most of the higher end Kias, Hyundais, all that kind of thing, like the EV6 for example, Ioniq 5, they've got that iPedal mode, and you can also control the regen braking on paddles on the wheel. That's missing here, and I think that would really add some functionality to the car. In terms of your driving assist features, you do have smart cruise control. It's not got like one button driving assist like in the Korean manufacturers' cars, which is a shame. But you know, it's still functional if you don't really use that sort of thing that much. And it's got the front radar assist, and it's got the blind spot monitoring. Again, unfortunately, it's not got that higher end tech like some of its rivals, like the blind spot cameras and that kind of thing. It's just missing a few of those features at this price point, which I think is a shame. But again, you're trading off for something that's a little bit different, a little bit more artsy, and just a bit of a nicer overall interior feel, I guess. It's just a bit different, and I think that's what you're getting with this package. Right, so I think now's a good time to take it for a quick 0 to 60 test and then have a little run down some country lanes and see how she feels. Right, it's in drive mode. Let's put it in sport. 0 to 60 in 5.5 seconds with the four-wheel drive. Let's go. Oh, yeah, I've lost my paperwork. That's quite a cool noise as well. Right. I've got it in sport mode now to sharpen everything up a little bit, and I've got it in its normal drive mode to reduce the regen braking effect and allow it to coast a little bit more. And let's take it for a little blast down some country lanes and see what it's like at B-road bashing. Now, of course, again, this isn't the sort of car really that you would do a lot of this with, but with all this power, why not give it a go? Yeah, it pulls really nicely, quite instant throttle response. The braking doesn't feel too bad. It is a little bit spongy, like you do expect on an EV. It's not terrible. The travel's okay. I think the only thing that I don't like is it does feel like there's a lot of car to stop. It doesn't feel... I'm gonna just make sure this is clear up here, and then I'm gonna try and do a little bit of an emergency stop just to see. Just want to confirm what I'm feeling about these brakes. I'm just going to do an emergency stop from about 30 mile an hour. Oh yeah, it kind of, the pedal kind of bottoms out and there's a bit of a judder. I don't love the feel, but it's definitely not the worst I've experienced. You've got to be a little bit careful because they're not as sharp as you might expect when you first press them. Steering feel, again, it handles pretty well, right? It's a little bit wallowy if you really chuck it in, and it's not particularly pointed at the front. Like, there's a tiny delay on the chassis. When you tug it in, it doesn't quite do what you want it to immediately, but that's not really the end of the world, is it? Got a kind of wiggly section here. Let's see what the handling's like. I can feel enough texture through the wheel to have confidence in the car, and whilst it does feel heavy, it really does hold on. Random comment, but the like the flash and the indicator stalk all feels quite nicely damped. I like that. Right, let's really push it now and do some sporty driving. It's the brakes that are the limitation, I think, on a road like this. Yeah, it's more than quick enough. I think the next model up would feel quite ballistic, to be honest. But yeah, I'm impressed overall. Let's calm it down and put it back into standard mode, so things are a little bit less dramatic. And I'll put it back down into the sort of regen braking mode as well, and we can just cruise along. Yeah, I'm quite impressed, really. Like, overall, it does feel quite good. And I've actually driven one of these on track. I did that at Millbrook Proving Ground, and it was quite impressive, to be fair. Like, you can feel the weight when you're really going for it in the corners, but I was pushing it way beyond what you would do on the road. So overall, quite impressive. So overall then, what do I think? What's the summary of the Nissan Ariya? Well, it's an interesting car. I don't think it's better than any of its rivals. I think the Korean cars, you know, the Ioniq 5, the EV6, all that sort of thing, I think they are much better equipped in terms of tech, but that might drive some people bonkers. I think the missing touch to this glorious interior is just the extra practicality bits, and also the design of the infotainment. If you put a Hyundai infotainment system in here, it would be almost perfect. I think the driving experience overall far surpasses anything else that Nissan has got out in the family segment. And of course, you're going to get more practicality if you go for something like a Skoda Enyaq, or, you know, one of the other Volkswagen Audi Group rivals, maybe an ID4. I don't know. There's a few other cars out there that do have some slightly more practical elements in terms of the rear cargo space and rear passenger space and things like that. But I think this has enough equipment and enough simplicity to satisfy a lot of people, especially those who are going EV for the first time. So if you're the sort of person who's been looking for a car that's all EV and quite plush, then this is one to consider. It doesn't go too overboard on the tech, so it's quite familiar to most people jumping in it. And a lot of the extra gimmicks on here are actually useful and quite impressive to show off to your pals. I'm just not sure about that price point. I'm not sure I could stomach spending sort of 50 odd grand on a decent spec one when the rivals are just a little bit better equipped and a little bit more modern. That being said though, every time I get in this, I'm just in awe at the interior. I just find it so lovely, and there's so many talking points in here, and I'm really geeky about stuff like that. So yes, some cars might have better tech and some might be a little bit sharper to drive, but there's just something really nice about this. Maybe it's one of them cars that you can just shortlist, and then when you see one with 15 grand off the list price, you can snap it right up. Anyway, if you are looking for a deal on a Nissan Ariya, you can find current lease deals by clicking my link in the description below. Helps out the channel, and it's guaranteed to find you one of the best deals on the market. If you've watched until this point in the video, then you are seriously considering one of these probably, or you find it interesting enough that you might want to go and check one out in person. I do encourage you to do so. But as I sit here with my feet deep in the thick pile carpet, looking at my Japanese floor lantern, with my iPad on the table, I just think, where else are you going to get this? That's the selling point. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to Nissan for sending me out the car. And as always, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.